Steve, thanks for being here today.
Yeah,
thanks for coming in.
It, yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know who you are, what you do, just give us like a brief overview of what you've been up to lately.
So my name is Steve Holt. I own a business called Olive Branch Millworks, or the official name is Olive Branch Designs. I take in logs and I turn them into reusable lumber.
So like how long have you been doing that?
I started the business about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I've been into woodworking pretty much my whole life. Even as a kid, I grew up around it. But the business, I started it about 5 years ago.
Okay. So what was it like for me? Like I was working for a company in 2014, and they ended up going through bankruptcy, and they moved it to Ogden, Utah. I realized that I had no control. I had no say in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I saw the way that they kind of treated the people that had been there for decades. Like some of these people had been working there 20, 30, 40 years. They'd been with the company. And as soon as they sold, they got out of bankruptcy, like they just cut ties with everyone. Like I've worked for companies that are good, companies that you could tell that their priorities are more about themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So after that, like I wasn't excited about jumping into another like full-time job. And so I started freelancing. But like I knew that like I wanted to build up my own company.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that kind of helped you get in that other frame of mind of like, I don't want to work for another person. Like I want to be able to start and do my own thing and be able to build my own company.
Yeah, I had a lot of similar situations like that. I got tired of working for companies. You have to work for companies to get experience, when you're younger. And I mean, you can't just jump to the top of the ladder unless you're got some super talent, and everybody wants to exploit you. But, so I worked for different companies. I was in a lot of management positions. My background is construction. There was a company that I had worked for before I had started my company that I guess it was the last straw that broke the camel's back. I couldn't take it anymore.
So what was that though?
That is...
At least the last straw. Like what?
Well... just like you said, people are out for themselves, even the people that work in the companies. And there is, corruption in companies. It's not all just, bells and whistles and, rainbows and everything's happy. Yeah, it's not, there's always something that goes on. I didn't want to operate my business that way. I didn't want to treat employees that way. And so I just decided, it's going to be a hard jump, but I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to run it the way I want to. I'm going to treat people right. I'm going to treat customers right and not just think about the money. I understand every company's got to make money, obviously that's why we're in business, but it's not always about just making money. It's about treating everybody, all your customers, like they're your friend almost, and when you do that, business grows quick. People really appreciate that. It goes a long ways. The last company I worked for, it was about themselves. There was people that were trying to come up in the company for their own benefits, and that's tough. Yeah, it is. It's
like everybody suffers.
Yeah.
And in the long run, they suffer because then they end up working in a company where nobody else is excited to work in.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, that's, I was a facility manager at a golf course, and I had a handful of people that worked under me that were not treated correctly, because they cleaned the toilets or they mopped, and so they saw me. When they saw me come in, they were worried that I was going to treat them disrespectfully or boss them around. And
what they were used to.
That's just what they were used to.
And look at the stuff that they were doing and not value like who they were, what they were doing.
Yep. And they had a hard time when they hired me. They had a hard time with, keeping these people happy, getting the job done. And I was told about not too long after I started the job, maybe a few months after I started, the employees, they told me, they said, they thanked me, the way you treat us is so fairly, you know. I treated them with respect, you know. I wanted them to feel that they were appreciated. And when you do that and you don't treat them like you're a boss, you got to be, you know, like you're working with them, you know, you're a team. So when you treat them like that, they get excited about their job. They feel good, even if it's just mopping the floor, you know, polishing the porcelain,
Yeah.
you know. If you make somebody feel good about that, you know, you're going to get 110% out of somebody. Mm-hmm. So I do the same thing with my business and the customers that I have. You know, I treat them, if they're buying something that's a $40 piece of wood, or, you know, a $2,000 piece of wood, you know, I treat everybody the same. The $40 customer, I'll go out of my way to treat them the same way, you know. Yeah. So it goes a long way.
That's so true. Yeah.
You keep great. People, it's all about the long-term customers and relationships.
Mm-hmm. It is, man. So then while you're transitioning from like working for somebody else, you had this experience where you saw how a business was run and how management was taken care of. And you wanted to do the opposite. So you break off, you start your own business. Now, like, that's a huge risk. Mm-hmm. What type of support were you getting? You know, from family, from friends? Or did you have anybody? Because when I did it, I had people that were pretty close to me.
Yeah.
Saying like, man, like, you're out of your mind. Like, just don't do that. It's not going to be stable. You know, it's not going to work out. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? Did you suffer any of that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, what's that? It cracks me up. That little, I don't even know. It shows like a entrepreneur and what their life is like, and it's like this roller coaster, you know, of emotions. And that's exactly what it is. You know, sometimes you feel like you're on top of the world and things are going amazing. You know, oh, business is growing, you're progressing, and then the next day you're just like, oh my gosh, man, I want to quit.
What am I doing?
Like, yeah, I still go through that. I mean, but you got to be persistent. But anyways, to answer your question, yeah, my wife, I love her. She's given me a lot of support. Yeah. It was hard for her too, and I completely understand. My dad, you know, he had his own business. Okay, he understands, you know, that when work comes in, you work, and then you have work. Okay, so it's not 9 to 5, and you work all the time because the business is there. So you always work, and you take it while you can get it. And my wife, you know, this is completely fine. She came from a background where her dad taught her, you know, you get a 9 to 5, you work hard, you know, and you go to work, and that's what you do, you know. So that was her mentality. So yeah. She was very supportive, but she did have a very hard time with me trying to do the opposite of what she was trained to do. You know, the mortgage would come around, her bills and whatnot, and she would freak out, you know, like, where's the money coming from, you know?
How are we going to make this work?
Yeah, how are we going to make this work, you know? Totally. And, you know, I was always persistent. And her dad even, too, was like, you know, Steve, yeah, you know, you got to, you know, get a solid job. And, you know, he told me that in the beginning. And, you know, he's just looking out for his daughter. But,
yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it works out for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the majority of people, they're working within a company. Mm-hmm. And so like it works out. There is a sense of you know, security there. But like still at the end of the day, it's not something that you really control.
No.
You know, it's like you're still like kind of looking at whoever's running the company and just being like, okay, like, well, you know,
yeah,
it's up to them whether or not this continues or not, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, especially with how some companies are run. But mm-hmm. It is, man. There's a lot of people out there that think that, you know, the way to move forward is to go out and try to be as secure as possible.
Yeah.
But when you're starting your own thing, I mean, there's just like tons of risk. As you have continued to work and build your business, has that dynamic kind of changed with you and the people that are close to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the work it's been, like I said, I think 5 or 6 years now. You know, yeah, there's still times when, you know, you're just, work is consistent. Okay, but it's still sporadic. So as long as you're not, frivolous with your money and you just save, then you'll be all right. You just got to budget things a lot. You got to stick to a budget. You got to pay all your bills, and then if you have 50 cents to save it after everything's done, right?
And then even Wendy, I think you're telling me that she started a business, right?
Yeah. My wife has a succulent business. She's got a big following on Facebook. Does arrangements, succulent arrangements. She sells just succulents, and she grows them, propagates them. And she does pretty well too. She ships every single day consistently. And she's doing pretty good. So it's surprisingly.
Yeah.
not if you're watching this, babe, it's not I'm not surprised. You're very talented, but it's amazing how her business has grown.
Yeah.
So
no, she's incredibly talented. I've seen the stuff that she does.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the way that she puts the plants together with the she puts them on she like arranges it.
Yeah, she does. Actually, I'll help her out too. Our business goes hand in hand, because she'll want logs and I'll carve them out, or the wood slices. Sometimes she puts arrangements on that. That's various things like that.
Yeah, succulents are a strange thing. Like my wife, she's gotten into them, and it's like they could die and then they come back.
Yeah.
And like part of it's dying, you just cut it off, and then
put it in the ground,
replant it, and it just
I wish it was like that.
So like, okay, sometimes I think about businesses that are growing. Like I've thought about my business as like growing it in phases. And so when I first started it, I was focused on trying to get more clients, but really like developing my own capabilities. And so I was looking at equipment. I needed to go out and I needed to have the equipment so that I could do the work that I needed to do. And then like when the pandemic started, like that whole entire year was like really about sustainability for me. It was like, okay, now like when I'm in this incredibly uncertain time, like can this business continue to sustain? And thankfully, like it totally did. And we ended up having a really good year that year. Now for this year, like my focus has been in like developing team, and so getting the team together. I know that you haven't started developing a team yet, but like it's been interesting because I've been following you as you've been going through this process of like really developing your capability. Can you kind of like walk us through that? You starting off, like I remember coming over to your shop and like seeing like these big, huge, the chainsaws and stuff, big collection of them. And I remember you called me up one day and you're like, dude, like you'll never believe this, like this mill that I just got. And so it's been really cool to see.
That's right.
Yeah, to see like your progression.
Yeah.
in building your capacity.
Right.
So like, just kind of like walk us through like a quick roadmap.
Yeah, I was excited. Yeah, I like collecting chainsaws. Some people like collecting cameras. Somebody they see my wall of chainsaws and they're like, "What in the world? Like, am I safe?"
You're like some of the biggest ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I got old ones and small ones, and that's just kind of most of them work. It's just that's kind of fun. But anyways, where I'm going with that is I started my business with the chainsaws. If I'm answering you correctly, I started with the chainsaw mill. And with my business, it's
describe what a chainsaw mill is. Like,
it's basically a chainsaw mill is a chainsaw with a really large chainsaw bar. You don't call it a blade, by the way. A lot of people call the chainsaw blades. They're actually getting off on a tangent, but they're actually chains. They're not blades, and that chain goes around a bar. Okay, so you have a very large bar with the chain, and you slide the chainsaw mill back and forth like this on a jig. So it's all a jig. The jig goes on the chainsaw, and then that jig slides across this like ladder looking thing that's on top of a log.
Made out of metal.
Yeah, yeah. You can make it out 2x4s.
And so it allows you to just make these big slabs.
Yeah, right? These big slabs. And it's absolutely pain in the butt to do it that way, okay? Because a kerf is the size of the cut that the chain makes, or like a table saw. When you cut something, that's called a kerf, okay? That's very small, all right? So the smaller the kerf, the better. On a bandsaw, you have a very small kerf, and you can cut things very fast, all right? Takes out less wood. A chainsaw, takes out about 1/4 of an inch. So you could be like, depending on how large the log is, it could take you like a couple hours or more to cut one slice.
Because you're just taking out so much of the wood.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I started off my company like that. I started off in the garage. I built a little wooden shelf, and I was selling slabs here and there. And that was before I even incorporated my business. And then I eventually came into a bandsaw mill. Okay, after about 5 years. That helped me progress the business drastically, which is this.
So this is the
bandsaw mill. Okay, this is the workhorse, the Woodmiser LT50 hydraulic. Mm-hmm. And this.
Wait, tell me. I vaguely remember, because you were telling me about the deal that you made on how to get this, or how you got that.
How I got that? Yeah, I was very fortunate to get a deal on this. I got this. I bought basically the guy's whole business. He had a bunch of logs in a lot, and he had this saw, and he had it in Southern California here, which is unheard of. These saws are usually in Northern California, where there's a lot of logging going on.
Yeah.
So
all the trees are.
Yes. So I'm like one of the only wood nerds down here, and that wants to mill logs, and some guy had this. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely astounded, and I found out about this through a customer of mine. He comes to me, and he says, "Hey, do you know there's another guy in Simi Valley? He's got a Woodmiser bandsaw, and I think he's looking to sell it." I'm like, "Yeah, right," So I linked up with them, and I got in contact with them, and I talked with them, and I made that deal, and I purchased this for pennies on the dollar. We'll put it that way. I was very fortunate to get a very affordable deal, and that pretty much started the business right there. I had purchased, along with this, I'd purchased probably 50 logs and a stack of pre-cut slabs. Wood slabs ready to go, and I had a yard that I had taken over, and then I went from there. So it went from the chainsaw mill to this, and it's just been progressing. I got a forklift after that. I bought a truck. I've got logs that come in regularly. Before I think you get an employee with this stuff, you need the equipment to even get this stuff going. Because one man can't operate all this. For a while, but, we're getting to that point where we need more people working with us.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't it something where he was like leaving the logs and the slabs that he'd already cut, and he just didn't want to do any of it anymore?
Yeah.
And then he came in, and then like from the slabs that he had already cut, didn't you like turn around and was able to like make all of your investment back?
Oh,
I'm like just selling the stuff that
you got to be savvy. You got to be savvy. That's exactly what I did. So some of the slabs were, they twisted. You have to stack slabs properly to let them air dry. Okay. So some of them weren't all stacked properly, and it was pine. Pine's not top dollar. So yeah, I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I started adding up. I knew all the prices, what you could get for them. But I was thinking to myself, after I just made this purchase, I thought, okay, if I sell all these, at this price, let's not think about, the most that I can get out of these. I'm thinking about a price where I can move these things and make my money back. That's what it's about, right? So I priced them all, I think, like at about $60 each, and they were flying out the door. I sold hundreds of them. I sold so many of them that I paid for this whole mill and the investment and more. I'll put it that way. Awesome. So, That was a big blessing. I mean, that really got my whole business started. Yeah. So it's not about the way I like to think. It's not always even, going back to just selling these things. Even till this day, it's not about making top dollar, because you don't make money with products sitting around.
Yeah.
You make money when it's going out the door. So if you have a slab, let's say that's worth, this is the way I think, I'll just tell you, if you have a slab that's worth $500, okay, that, you probably get that, but it could sit around for a year till you find that right buyer. But if you put a price tag on it, let's say 160, maybe $200, that's going to fly out the door. It's going to motivate somebody who maybe couldn't afford a 500 slab to buy that slab. Mm-hmm. So you sell more of those at that price, it's better like that to sell in quantity. So that's how I've always run my business, is to keep affordable prices for everybody, and not be cheap, but have affordable prices. That's how I continued my business, and I still do. It's just I keep moving product. That's what I'm about.
Yeah. No, that's super smart, man.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not only doing the lumber, but you're also I don't want to say carpenter, but fine craftsman. I mean, I've seen some of the furniture, and just like all the detail work that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Like you're an artist.
Wow.
So, but you also have people not only buying the raw lumber from you, but you also have clients that are hiring you to come into their houses, build furniture, build, just all this stuff. Like, tell us a bit about how kind of that got started.
Yeah. So I've always liked, I love selling. I mean, I actually like just cutting up lumber and seeing like what's inside. It's like the
grain, right?
Oh gosh,
so
you ask a lot of guys. I'm not the only weirdo like that. There's a lot of woodworkers that are just, they love doing that. It's like
it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's like opening. You kind of know if you've studied logs a lot, like I have, what it's gonna look like. But it's like opening a gift on Christmas. You just get so excited.
It's just like it's hidden in there.
Yeah,
and you start looking at every tree that you pass when you're driving down the street. And you're like, there's something.
Well, that's what I'm getting off of your question. I'll get back to it, but I do that. I'll be driving down the road with my wife, and I'm like, you know how much money's growing right there? I said, you know what that tree? She's tired of hearing it. She's like, oh my gosh. I told her money does grow on trees,
It does. For you, dude. Totally
For me, it does. Anyways, so yes, not only do I sell lumber and the live edge slabs, but I'm also an artist. I create furniture, do sculptures. I do a lot of furniture. So people, or I should say my customers or my clients, they come to my yard, they pick out their slabs, and then if they want, work out something, and I create a table for them. Yeah, or not just a table, anything, furniture, vanities. I do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, whatever they do.
Yeah,
like I've seen you do built-in stuff.
I do built-in,
kitchens, and inside their houses, and I was just looking at earlier today, like a privacy fence that you put up.
Oh yeah,
block wall.
Yeah, that was out in Fillmore. That was fun.
Yeah, that was super cool. Like I've seen fences where the slats are all vertical, right?
Yeah.
And yours was like all horizontal.
Yeah, and I milled all that wood myself, so I'm able to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
That's one of the perks of having a sawmill. You don't have to purchase. You sawmill the lumber yourself. So.
Mm-hmm. Serious, man.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about just like making the furniture, and maybe some of the things that you've learned about like dealing with clients in that. Because it's one thing to like make a product, or to get a log and cut a bunch of inventory, right? Mm-hmm. And then the customer comes in and they pick out the slab that they want. Mm-hmm. But then it's a different thing maybe
to make furniture for somebody.
Yeah, when you're making like a one-off piece, and maybe they're really invested in it, not just financially, but like it's super meaningful to them. It's going to be in their kitchen, where their family meets.
Oh yeah,
they have ideas of how they want it to be.
Yeah,
talk to me about.
Is there a difference between selling lumber and making a table for someone? Mm-hmm. Huge difference. I will say it is nice selling lumber and being like, have a good day, come again.
It requires a little bit less from me, right?
Yeah,
It's just,
people.
it's an easier process.
Yeah, and I don't mind. I don't mind it at all. But yeah, it's definitely a different process because one, you get a lot. They may be. Let's not say the people that are picking out the lumber for their project, the people that are just coming to buy, or I mean, a project for me to make for them, the people that come to pick out a slab to make for themselves, they look around, they buy it, and then they're on their way to make their own project. For me, when the customer comes, they pick out their own slab. It's a process, you stick with them. It usually takes a couple months to build a big table, a really nice table. Especially, I mean, it could take longer depending. I mean, it just depends on my workload too, how long. And then epoxy takes a long time to, not a long time, but it's a process to dry. Your deep pour epoxies could take 72 hours to dry. And then, yeah, so,
Do you have to do those in layers?
Well, that's the thing. Okay, so it's a process because you got to, you just see on YouTube videos that people, throw the epoxy and they're, hey, we're done,
Yeah.
It doesn't go like that. You got to, and the reason why they cost so much too is because you got to build a form. You got to make sure that that's slick. You have to surface the slab so it's flat. It's that setup process, and then you finish the slab. You pour in the epoxy, and the epoxy is very expensive. Okay, that's what people don't realize. The epoxies, could be anywhere from $90, $150, $200 a gallon.
But some of these tables, they take a lot.
Oh yeah, I built tables where they're customer spends just $2,000 on epoxy, and that's just epoxy, that's not the the slab and the forms, so you have all those costs that go into it. To get back what you're saying, yeah, you're more invested with the customer. You walk through them, you're with them for a couple months, and it's usually a big expense for the customer, and it's something very special that they're buying, so they want this, it's got to be perfect. And I try to always achieve that. And thankfully, I haven't had any real big complaints. But, when it comes to somebody spending money like that, there's always one fine little detail that, they might point out. So it's a little different than selling a piece of slab or just one slab.
Yeah, no, I imagine, man.
Yeah.
So, considering your experience over the past 5 to 7 years, what would you say are some of the big lessons that you've learned, or kind of aha moments, or maybe some of the ways that the way that you think about things have changed, your mindset has just kind of changed as a business owner.
The aha moments, pay the government on time? No,
that's a big one.
Yeah, your LLC
in California. We do that.
Yeah.
Or what about misconceptions or limiting beliefs? I've noticed it in my business, as I step to the next level, each level, there's kind of this these voices inside of my head, and they're just oh, this is going to be too difficult,
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I got some. Yeah.
And then as soon as you actually go through it and you step through that,
right,
and then you're on the other side of that and you're looking back at it, you're like, man, that was too easy. I can't remember. I thought that was going to be much more difficult. It could be difficult and it could take effort, but it's looking back in retrospect, it wasn't as large as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. The mountain wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be to get over.
Sometimes you feel like things are going very well, oh man, had a great month, a lot of business, and then
everything's clicking.
Everything's together. Yeah. And then, some days you're just feel like throwing in the towel, but that's the hurdle I'm talking about. When you get your mindset out of that and you just think, sometimes you just gotta become a robot and just go through the motions, get your routine done, take care of your customers, maintain the yard. Oh, here we go. So sometimes maybe there's not stuff coming in, but what do? I go to the yard and I make it presentable for the customers. I always find something to do there because even if I'm not making money today doing what I'm doing, it's going to help me in the future. It's going to help my business. I'm going to have a presentable yard I'm going to have products that are displayed. It's going to be safe for people to walk around. And so little things like that, you got to get through those hurdles of like, what am I going to do? Or, stuff like that. Here's another one. I hope that wasn't too confusing.
No, that was great, man. That was like, there's always something productive to do.
There is. Whether, I told a friend, I said, you know what, in his business, I said, you always have to find something with your business. Even if, like, I know I'm repeating myself, but you have to, even if you're not making money today, it will help you out in the future. You're always, find something to do. I don't care if it's like I said, picking up, sweeping, something, making it safe for people, make some calls, see if somebody wants to come buy some lumber. Follow-up calls, I do all the time. I mean, I'm constantly calling people or texting people, hey, you want to come? And then, so I do stuff like that. Okay, say I get a load of logs in. Sometimes I get just, massive logs. When they come in, it could be a lot of work. You got a lot of moving around to do. You got to put them. What's going through my mind is like, okay, I have all these logs. I got more inventory to move. I'm gonna have a lot of excess cuttings. I got to get rid of the cuttings. I'm gonna have more stuff. So it's not a bad thing, But I do, when I get more logs in, it sometimes overwhelms me, But I know it's a good thing, because everything, it eventually always sells. The logs, they come from, I've developed quite a few business relationships, and I do a lot of, I'll just go out, and sometimes I will, I wouldn't say just go out to different companies and ask them or offer to them, say, hey, this is what I do. I know you have to pay to dump this. You want to come bring it to my yard, and that's how I get my logs. Or I've actually developed a contact with, I've got something worked out with a city, and I'm able to go and pick up all their logs. So I have...
the city has their tree trimmers. The guys that go out, not only trim the trees, but also take out trees that have died and stuff.
Oh, there's a huge amount. My business, and I wish I had a bigger yard at the moment, because there are so many trees that come in every single day. It is unbelievable. It's staggering. Like, if I was able to keep up with the amount of trees that came in every day from the city, I would have just inventory till, I don't even know, till the world ends,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And it's not just me, because I love woodworking. I do, and I love milling, but I also want to be a part of helping to reduce green waste. And I've been trying to do that, because a lot of this stuff gets thrown back into the dump, or what they do is they put it in these big machines called tub grinders, and then they just shoot not the debris, but the wood chips back onto the freeway, the sides of the freeway. So that's how they get rid of all that stuff. Yeah. And it's not the most effective way to do it.
I mean, it could be enjoyed.
Yeah, it can be. Be turned into furniture. It could be turned into building lumber. There's a lot of unique and very, very beautiful logs and trees, different species, just here in the city. It's pretty amazing. A lot of I hear about a lot of guys just going, let's get the exotic wood imported from here and there. I mean, yeah, that's fine, and get it out of the rainforest, but they don't even realize, there's, you got walnuts, Brazilian pepperwood, which grows like a weed around here, and it's absolutely amazing. I'm trying to educate a lot of woodworkers about this, because they don't use it. Brazilian pepperwood. There's the olive tree, which is one of my favorites. And more. There's a lot more. Yeah.
No, totally, man. I remember going over to your shop and seeing all of these beautiful woods.
Yeah.
And asking you, what is this? And you're like, it was a tree that was growing, on the other side of the city.
Yeah.
And now it's here, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then you sell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's awesome.
So yeah, there's always, and even though I may get it for free, there's always, I get this question all the time, Pat, will you get that for free? And I'm like, well, yeah, but the thing weighs 9 tons, I didn't, it takes, a semi truck and a large excavator to load it, and somebody's got to pay for that. So, it does, I may be getting them for free, but it gets paid for somehow, so
transportation costs.
yeah, definitely
It's like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The cost of processing it once you get it into
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not completely free. So
No.
I want everybody to keep that in mind.
Yeah. No, definitely. Man.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So what would you say is next for you? I know before you were talking about that you're looking to, hire somebody to come in. What do you think at the end of this year, your company is going to look like?
Yeah, I've actually thought about, I think about that all the time, but I was putting some thought into that earlier this week, and I'm right now I'm in the process of looking for a large property so that I can grow. I want to have consistent sales. I want to stack inventory up as much as I can. I don't want there to be a restriction on the logs that I can take in, and I would like to get possibly a salesperson and a couple people helping so that we can push product more. So and increase the productivity of the yard,
Awesome.
and turn it, so yeah, that's what I'd like to do, and we'll get there. It's just I don't know when. Just
You'll do.
all I know is if you're persistent and you don't give up even when you're discouraged, then you'll come through.
That's a huge lesson, man.
Yeah.
It's like it's the idea that you don't fail until you stop trying.
Right. Yeah. You got to just do what you know best. You can't. I know there's a lot of people out there trying to do a lot of different gimmicks, but you can't be distracted from all this stuff going on in the world. You just got to do what you know best, and then work hard, treat people right, and then everything will follow.
Awesome, brother. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody that wants to get in touch with you or kind of keep up with what you're doing, you're pretty. What's your Instagram handle?
Instagram is Olive Branch Designs is the business name. The Instagram is Olive Branch Millworks, and my email is uniqueinnovation@hotmail.com. You can reach me through there.
Well, sweet, dude. Thanks.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks.